Thank you, everyone, for being here. It's an honor to join you this evening and to have our participants on our recent mission, our solidarity mission between Beth Israel and Beth Jacob, to share their reflections with the larger community. We are recording tonight so that those who want to hear these reflections but can't join us in person will be able to hear them later. And I'm going to pass it on to Rabbi Yonatan Cohen.
Thank you, Rabbi Albert. I wanted to begin this evening just with a word of tremendous hakarat tov, of recognition and gratitude. First and foremost, I wanted to express my gratitude to Rabbi Albert, who initiated this trip and then invited the Beth Israel community to join forces and go together as one single community. And then I want to share something personal, which will lead to my own personal hakarat tov. One of the most profound and moving experiences, and I would say comforting and I wouldn't say healing, but grounding experiences that I had in Israel was joining the group. We were about 20. At the cemetery to visit the burial site of my nephew Yoav Malayev, who was died heroically on October 7, defending and commanding an entire base that was not conquered, one of two bases that was not conquered on October 7, saving over 70 lives. And at some point, as the group approached the burial site, and I stayed far back as a Cohen. I can't come close. I stayed on the path, and I just couldn't believe my eyes seeing members of our communities who I love and feel so close with. You know, our former president Carol Conradi and Jim were there, and then Brian and Fran, who have been so pivotal and critical in building OHDS and JCHS, and the Wilkoff family, who I got to know over this trip, Judy and Bella. I mean, I really want to mention every person who was there, because I just couldn't believe my eyes to see my East Bay family, my Oakland and Berkeley families, joining my own family in Israel and doing the mitzvah of Nichum Avelim. And at that moment, I suddenly realized how I longed to have my two homes come together, my home here in the Bay and my home in Israel, my family here in Beth Israel and extended family of OHCS and Beth Jacob and JCHS and my family in Israel, the Cohen and Malaya families, who are undergoing a tremendous and profound tragedy. And as I realized that this group of 20 individuals represented something so much bigger to me, you know, something that is symbolic but felt really true to me at that moment. I felt like everyone from our shuls were there. That the group that we were there with actually embodied all of you. And that was profoundly powerful to feel that the mission was embodied by 18 individuals, but all of you in some way were there. You were certainly there materially. Every day gave us an opportunity to give tzedakah and to contribute financially, and I know that our communities have been at the forefront of contributing to Israel in the Bay Area, contributing materially, contributing politically, contributing through our activism, and that was felt at that moment for me. And so I wanted to extend that gratitude to everyone here, and the fact that on a Thursday night, there are 49 participants on a Zoom call. There's probably more, because in some screens there's more than just one face showing. Lets you know about how Israel is so central to our communities, and that when we think about Israel, it's not an abstract thing, and it's not something in the news. It's literally our brothers and sisters. And I want you to know also that the experience that I had was experienced by the individuals that we met. I know that from my parents. I know that from my sister. I know that from Shiri and Moti, who really felt that the Beth Jacob community and the OHS communities and the Beth Israel communities were there. And the fact that on a 6-day trip, we prioritize that half the day will be, getting on that bus and driving to the cemetery and spending the morning in the heat of the summer, just taking it in and doing Nichum Avilim. And I want to just say one last note. On our Friday night, we went to the Kotel as a group, and as we were headed out of the Kotel, this man ran to me at the men's section and grabbed me, and it took me actually about 10 minutes of conversation with him and then meeting up with his wife to realize who he was. But Rabbi Cohen, it's amazing to see you. You don't know what our visit to the Bay Area did. It transformed our lives. And it turned out to be a man in his early 60s who never left the state of Israel in his entire life until about 5 years ago. His wife had a conference to attend in Berkeley for a month-long kind of seminar, and he joined her. And it was the first time that he ever left the state of Israel. It was his first experience of the diaspora. And his wife sent me an email beforehand and said, like, I just want to give you a heads up. My husband, he knows nothing about Galus. He knows nothing about the diaspora. He's in for a cultural shock. I hope you could like hold his hand as he experiences. And then he was here for 3 weeks attending minyanim. He visited Beth Jacob. He got to know people from our local Oakland Hebrew Day School, and it transformed him. It opened his eyes. He suddenly saw a different world and recognized that there's a vibrancy outside of Israel that is really important and that he can learn from. And he shared that with me. He said, I just want you to know that in our family, that visit to the Bay Area where we got to see Jewish life and the vibrancy of like your communities, it changed the way that I see my Yiddishkeit, and it strengthened our family spiritually. And I walked away from the Kotel at that moment thinking like here we are, like what's the odd, like what are the chances that I'm gonna meet this guy who like I never thought I'll meet again. I didn't even remember him. And that like his visit to the Bay Area, being witness to like the communities that you've helped establish and run and you're so critical to, made a difference in his life. And it was kind of to me like a gift from Hashem to say like, here you are, you like you're not sure about like what the meaning of what you're doing in Chutz La'aretz, in the diaspora, and I want you to know as you leave the Kotel that like your mission is important. You have a mission here, and you have a mission in the Bay Area as well. And here too, I feel like that's something that we all share. Like everyone who's affiliated with our communities, with Beth Jacob and Beth Israel, we have such an important mission, and it plays out in Israel through the mission that we've had, and it plays out locally all the time. And I want you to know that there's going to be reward for our actions. I really believe that, and that we're doing something important here. And it's not only recognized here by us, but it's also recognized by someone who's never been to Chutz La'aretz outside of Israel, except for once. And our communities were transformative for him. And then with that, I'm gonna pass it back to Rabbi Albert. At the Kotel, Rabbi Albert led us in an amazing davening. Those of you who are at Beth Jacob know what I'm talking about. And I got to be his chazan sheni. I got to be backup vocals, and it was so exciting that at some point I got really loud and I drowned him out for like a moment.
Ken
Then
Yerbu.
and
Ken Yerbu.
and I have to tell you that if the only thing that I got to be is like chazan sheni, backup vocals to Rabbi Gershon on this trip, Dayenu.
Thank you, Rabbi Cohen. It was such an honor after Rabbi Cohen's been at Beth Israel for 18 years, and I've been at Beth Jacob for 10 years. We finally got to spend our first Shabbos together, and Dayenu for that as well. I'll wrap things up later. Thank you, Rabbi Cohen. So here's what we're going to do. We have a slideshow that a number of trip participants shared their pictures with me, and I'll run the slideshow while they offer their reflections, and then we'll go into other reflections as well from trip participants. So let me get started with the slideshow for us, And I would like to ask Judy if she would introduce her pictures.
Sure, it would be my honor. So I started with what was absolutely a highlight for me, I have to say. And that was I had the privilege of being in Israel a number of weeks before the mission began. And when I was looking through all of the photos I've taken so far, an inordinate number of them were of food. Um, and that was, I think, because not only was it beautifully presented and delicious and eaten in very good company, but whenever I've been to Israel, I've often felt like even being at the shuk and seeing the pomegranates they seem like as big as softballs, like a great deal of shefa, a real feeling of abundance. And so this was a particularly tasty dish. I'm not a meat eater, but while I was in Israel, I did eat some meat, and it was really quite special. I think it's an Iraqi dish from a restaurant called Ishtabach. And I don't know how to say the name properly, Rabbi Albert, you might know. But so my first slide was really just to highlight the great feeling of abundance I felt, both in wine I got to drink and food I got to eat. It was really quite a highlight for me, actually.
Thanks, Judy. Is everyone able to see the slides?
Is that the slide? Yep.
Okay. Yeah, it was Ishtabach in Shuk Machne Yehuda, which I had the great joy and privilege of eating there with Judy and with the K's. It was amazing. Ishtabach, like a play on Yishtabach, the prayer, but a man who is a chef, Ishtabach.
All right.
Is it a bird? What is it?
No, it's a pocket of dough filled with stewed meat. Okay, let's see. I don't really see the next one yet.
I think what we were seeing was like the beginning of the slideshow before you actually press play on the slideshow.
Hmm. Okay.
How about now? Is that better?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I'll just keep it this way.
Okay, so this one is of a very different nature. This was from Hostage Square. And I actually don't know that I went up close to this particular art exhibit, but it was quite striking to me. I knew before I left about tremendous violence done against women on October 7, but I, since then, in fact, after coming home from Shul on Tisha B'Av Day, took the time to read some articles that were published already months ago about so much of the unfortunate things we've learned about how the women who were the spotters, who were not taken seriously and lost their lives and continue to not be taken seriously. So there was reading about that and how there's so much work to be done to correct that situation, both because of their gender and their rank, even though the work they do is so very critical. But also I read about all of the brutality done, and that was especially difficult to read. With articles, these were actually from Hadassah magazine, with articles that talk about some people seeing rape as a kind of resistance. And so it was very difficult to read the articles, but I felt that it was important that I read them.
Judy, I think we just lost you. Maybe it was Judy, I think you just went on mute. Yeah, we lost you at the difficulty of reading the articles.
Okay. I'm sorry. I didn't mute intentionally, but here I am. So yeah, I took many pictures that day in that location, but I wanted to take this one so that I would remember this particular aspect of the horrors of October 7th. This photo is from the Nova Festival in the South, and I was moved by two things when I took this photo. In fact, only realizing it yesterday when I was choosing pictures. There are beautiful trees in the background. The setting is quite striking visually and topographically. And then in the foreground are these ceramic red poppies that have been associated with battlefields and also with southern Israel in the springtime. And so this is another exhibit, an installation of the poppies representing the lives lost in that place. So I appreciated seeing the actual trees and then also these poppies made by humans to represent the gravity of the loss there. This was from much later in our week, actually. So that is the grave of Hannah Senesh. And one of the things I shared on the bus afterwards was when I am in cemeteries, and even also sometimes in shul, when we say the Mishaberach for people that are ill, I have this picture in my head of, or even when we say Kaddish, actually, people kind of listening from on high, as it were, for their names, feeling like, oh, they remembered me this week, or someone mentioned me while I'm getting better. So I had that same feeling at Har Herzl, the military cemetery, because it wasn't just the sadness of a cemetery, and especially the pain of the newest section, but we really walked through history and so many important figures in the history of the establishment of the state and even pre-state. Obviously, people who fell from all over the world, and it says so on their gravestones. But it was almost like the spirits of all of those people, Golda Meir, Hannah Senesh, Yoni Netanyahu, the young soldiers who most recently were buried there, almost like they were there and they were all together from the earliest time in the history of the state until now, just kind of grateful for our visit. So it was important and for me to take that one just because it's one that many people know. This is the last photo I chose. And this is a scene from an activity we did towards the end of our week called Playback Theater. And what you don't see is all of us on the mission sitting in a half circle around the players. What you do see is one of the players, and I think in this particular scene, she's using scarves to create a kind of a tree. And the way it worked briefly was that there was someone who asked us questions about our experiences, and then these two very talented actors or improv actors kind of brought what we shared to life, and especially our feelings. They also wanted to know how we thought it went. And then all the way in the back there, you see an electric keyboard, very skilled musician, choosing music very appropriate to what was being portrayed. And in this particular one, if I remember right, the actor is kind of talking. I might be wrong here, but I think it was when she was kind of bringing to life some of what Rabbi Cohen shared about his experiences and all the branches of his different homes and his different worlds. And so you can see something like the shape of a tree in this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. I'd like to ask Brian and Fran if they want to share their reflections now. Actually, before that, Bella, would you like to share your reflections just while we're on the same screen?
Down. Okay, it's just a few minutes, okay? Just stop me if you think it's too long. On a trip like this one, I come back so overwhelmed with emotions. The highlight of this outing for me was being present at the hotel during Kabbalah Shabbat, with so many people present, singing the familiar songs and the prayers. Unbelievably beautiful. Go and do that for yourself sometime. You'll never feel the same again about our Israel and our people. I felt so united with my idea of Hashem. The most difficult moment was standing at the spot where the Nova Rock Concert Festival had taken place and now was covered with small young trees, covered with flags and portraits of each a person where a lifeless body had been found, row after row. The next day, we visited the new dug graves where where our soldiers were laid. But this is just a remark on the side. I want to say Kaddish for our brave soldiers every day because they really are our children. I'm 88, so these are children. When I walk the rows of graves of these heroes, our protectors, I always wonder, how did they fall? How did they battle? How did they die? And also, how can we comfort the families that are left behind? That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you so
There's
much.
a lot more, but give somebody else a turn.
Thank you, Bella. So I'd now like to ask, you should be seeing the screen again with pictures, if I'm not mistaken. And I believe next up, Brian and Fran.
Yeah, so I would very much like to thank Rabbi Albert and Rabbi Cohen for an extraordinarily meaningful trip. And I'm also really thrilled that my mother is on the Zoom call so she can hear a little bit of the reflections of this very important trip. And a real big theme for me.
Very hard to hear you.
Is this any better? A big theme for me on this trip was the search for meaning and remembrance. And we had the privilege of meeting with 3 families of young soldiers who died heroically defending their country and defending their fellow soldiers, and got to hear their stories. And in each one of these cases, the families had tried to take something that they had done and share that with the world as a way of remembrance and a way of meaning. Here you see a picture of Yoav, who's Rabbi Cohen's nephew. Rabbi Cohen's father told me this is his very, very favorite picture of his grandson, and is in his house. And after Yoav was killed heroically defending his outpost and his fellow soldiers as a commander, his family was given his possessions back, and they found a small notebook that had an outline of his philosophy of leadership. And what you see to the right is a card that the family made listing 6 principles of leadership that Yoav had written in the notebook. To look when it gets tough, to hold your head high, set an example, be the best, pursue contact, reset and switch mindsets, and go all out. And they were sharing this card with many people. Can we turn to the next slide? And they actually had bracelets prepared with Yoav's name and one of these 6 principles on it. So those of us who have the bracelets now can think of Yoav on a constant basis. And when our going gets tough, we can follow these principles of leadership. Rabbi Cohen's mother also has created a school curriculum to help students deal with this great tragedy. Next slide. We also got to meet with the Tweedo family, with Shiri and Moti Tweedo, whose son Ayal also died heroically defending his men. And he also had a notebook that was found in his possession listing his philosophy of leadership. And they had made a bookmark that you can see here with the principles that he wrote in his notebook, that again, they're distributing as a way to keep his memory alive and share some of these wonderful principles. Next slide. And they also have created stickers. You can see this one on the top with Yoav's handsome face and a quotation outlining one of his principles of leadership. The third family that we met with, Rabbi Doron Perez, who's the president of the or chief executive officer for International Mizrahi, the religious Zionist organization, and his son Daniel was killed in action 4 hours apart from his other son, who was seriously wounded in action, and got married a couple of weeks later with this great machloket in the family as, do we go ahead with this wedding? Because at the time they didn't know if Daniel was alive and had been taken hostage, or had he perished in defending his country. And unfortunately, he had perished in defending his country. And again, with a quotation from Daniel, a sticker was presented with his photo to memorialize this heroic young man. But one thing that struck me with all 3 families is, with these tragic deaths, the families were able to get solace that their sons died heroically. They died for a purpose. They were defending their country. They were defending their fellow soldiers. They were defending the area around them. In the case of Yoav, this wasn't in Gaza. This was defending the settlements around Gaza. And as difficult as it is to lose a child, to lose a young person, they had this strong feeling that they died for a purpose. We can go to the next picture now. Now, some of the other places that we visited, this is Kfar Aza, a kibbutz right near the Gaza border. And we saw house after house showing the incredible destruction that the Hamas terrorists inflicted, burning people alive in the homes, showing utter destruction, lots and lots of bullet holes from shooting. And you can see this in the middle picture. The next picture, please. And pictures really can't give justice to the horror of being there and witnessing it in person. And then here's some pictures also from the Nova Festival, where 364 young people were slaughtered when they were out trying to celebrate life with this music festival. And we have a photograph and some articles for each of these individual people. So one can go and spend some time not looking at a number 364, but looking at each individual person. And in memory, on Tu B'Shvat, there was a tree planted, that's on the right side, for each one of the young people that was tragically murdered. Next slide. And when we went to Hostage Square, there are tents of family and friends of people. This is from people who were taken hostage from the Nova Festival, with pictures to keep their thoughts of their captivity alive, to remember them, to remember that we still need to bring them back. There is a Shabbat table, like so many communities around the world that have set up empty places for all the hostages that have not come home. And they've just left the table there over the 10 months that people have become hostages, and things have gotten dirty. And the Kiddush cups, the plates are all covered with dirt and grime, and this is on purpose to remember the time that's gone on. And even though the victims of this terror in the Gaza envelope at the Nova Festival are being remembered, the difficulty is trying to find meaning in their death, because unlike the soldiers who perished so tragically defending their country, these are people that were slaughtered completely senselessly without any meaning behind it. And it's something that I've really struggled a great deal of how do we think about these people? How do we mourn them? What does their life mean? Because not everyone can you attach their senseless death to, you know, such a heroic note. So for me, this idea of meaning and remembrance was a really, really important part of the trip. And I'll let Fran share a few of her reflections.
I think one of the most powerful moments on the trip, and one that engendered huge pride for me, came near the very end when we had a discussion at the hotel of the ethics of war, and that how, as Jews, we need to be thinking about what is the most ethical way, what is the way God would have us behave in a horrific situation to as a people. I don't know what other people in the midst of war, of defending their very existence, is tasked with thinking about how to engage in such a thing in the most ethical way possible. It just really blew me away. And all the things from the whole trip, you know, everything from planting food that was going to be given to people who needed it, and planting and harvesting and packaging food for people during wartime and not during wartime, for Israeli Jews and Israeli Arabs, for everybody. For it just that in the midst of good times and bad times, that as Jews, we are trying to do the right thing as a people. And it's such a hard thing to be tasked with, to try to do the right thing and to not always know what the right thing is. One of the most painful things was when we were at Captive Square and also in other places, and seeing the divide between Israelis who want the captives brought home right now, whatever cost we have to pay, but to bring them home right now, and other Israelis who say no, we have to decimate Hamas first. And to know that Israelis who've lost children, who've lost loved ones and parents and friends, that among Jews we are struggling with this at the same time that we're struggling with the world that doesn't begin to understand or want to understand what Israel is going through. And so holding all of those things amidst all the other things that we were talking about, sometimes I just am really overwhelmed and just start crying because it's just so much emotion, and there's so much to process.
Thank you, Fran. I'm going to share the screen again and pass it on to Carol and Jim, who shared
Great.
their pictures as well.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everybody. So let's see. Jim and I arrived in Israel a week ahead of time, and to get over the jet lag and also to visit with family and see friends. And this is a picture of me and my cousin Carl Percal. We both grew up in New York. Carl has lived in Israel for decades and decades. He raised his family there. He has 3 adult daughters and 2 little grandsons now. And here we are at a museum in Ein Hod. And Carl worked for decades for an organization, an Israeli NGO named Sequoia, and that promotes civic equality between Jewish Israelis and Arab Israelis. And he knows quite a few people in the Arab Israeli community. And actually during this trip, after we left the artist colony at Ein Hod, we actually went to Ein Hud, which is an Arab town, okay? And we met the mayor and we learned about their decades-long campaign to be recognized officially by the Israeli government, which they received about 30 years ago. So that was all fascinating. And Jim and I felt like we got sort of this insider view that we never would have gotten without Carl's accompaniment, okay? Here we are in the Carmel market with our friend Shirley Shuval. She's an Israeli woman who lived for many years in Berkeley. In fact, she still has a house in Berkeley, but her younger daughter, Noam, went to school at Techia with our younger daughter, Clara. And so when we're in Israel, we always make a point of visiting with Shirley. So here we are. And I'll just say that she was so thrilled to hear about our mission, okay, when we told her what we were there for and what we were going to do. And so that was really wonderful. You can go to the next one. Of course, when you arrive in, at Ben Gurion, there's the pictures of the captives, and of course we focused in on right. Judy's saying Shirley also used to work at the Netivot Shalom preschool. Okay, thank you, Judy. Focused on Hirsch's pictures. This is at Ben Gurion Airport. You could go on to the next one. And then here are me and Jim also at the artist colony in Ein Hod. All right, next slide. Here our group sponsored a barbecue for the soldiers, and it was kind of in some ways unreal because it's right near the Gaza border, and so this is at a kibbutz that the soldiers are using, and near Oz, and there's a swimming pool, and they have their rest and relaxation and so forth and so on, and then they go right back to Gaza. And so here we are with Meir. He's from France. You could see the big smile on his face. It was amazing talking to him. I mean, he was so appreciative of our visit, and he was so positive, and the resilience is just amazing. And he said he loves Paris, he loves his comrades, he loves the Jewish state. He was was incredible. So here we are with him. Okay. And then the last slide, I just want to talk about, so we did visit Kibbutz Kfar Aza, and as I'm sure everybody knows, was hit really, really hard. And the young man on the left, he was sort of our guide at the kibbutz, explaining to us what happened. And while he was talking with us, he got a call, and he said to us, "Oh, my dad's going to join us," and that's the man on the right. But what I wanted to describe is when his dad pulled up, they embraced, and his dad was miraculously rescued during the attack. Okay. On October 7th, and so when his dad came, they embraced in a way that if you didn't know anything else, you'd think, wow, they probably haven't seen each other in like 10 years. I mean, it was that kind of embrace. And then he went on with the tour, and then later on, maybe, I don't know, 30 minutes later, 40 minutes later, they met up again, and they embraced the same way again. And anyway, I just wanted to share their picture, and it was, people have already shown the destruction to kibbutz, so it's very, very hard to see that, but it's also very fortifying to hear from and to see actual survivors. Okay. And I didn't have pictures to show, but I wanted to just mention visiting the graves of Yoav and Eyal was also very significant, and it truly felt like family, like we were all one big family. And the last thing I'll mention is that our whole group had dinner, including the bus driver, had dinner with Rabbi Cohen's parents to end on the one big family theme. So
I'll just add that I've never traveled to a place where I was thanked by people for visiting and showing up and being supported. So I think it was as soon as we arrived, when we were buying our Israeli version of the Clipper card, and the guy selling the card says, welcome home, and our friend Shirley thanked us. The soldiers, multiple soldiers thanked us for coming and showing support, and just how much they appreciated us coming at this time and just being there. So that was really like, it was touching and unexpected. I might add kind of a funny and touching note is that, so every evening we'd be pretty wiped out. So Carol and I would watch the Olympics in Hebrew, obviously. And there was one particular like track and field meet with this like photo finish. And the announcer, he, how they get excited, he yells, Mi chamocha.
And Kili Olam Chasdo.
Yeah, Kili Olam Chasdo, with a particularly serious athletic performance. It was just like only one of those only in Israel moments.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol and Jim. Okay, we're gonna get back to the slideshow a little bit later. Leah, I also sent in pictures and some comments that I'll read on her behalf, but I'll just take a break from the slideshow so that we can get some more pictures interspersed in a few minutes' time. For now, I'd like to ask Leslie and Todd if they would share their thoughts on behalf of themselves and also on behalf of Rebecca Meyerhoff, who is here with us as well.
And Rebecca, and behalf of Leslie also, I'll be doing the speaking. So I'm much more of a writer than a speaker, so bear with me while I read a piece that I put together as my wife cuddles in. What struck me and all my fellow travelers, I think, was how unique a moment it was to be in Israel. Rabbi Albert pointed out that the 7th of October is referred to by Israelis as Shiva B'October, not just the 7th, but the Shiva of October. And that sense of being at a Shiva, both an individual's and a national one, was quite evident. We sat before mothers and fathers and grandparents who shared their unbearable losses, and we visited kibbutzim and grave sites and the Nova site that made the nation's losses palpable. During both those experiences, we also heard and witnessed profiles of incredible courage, of extraordinary women and men who placed their love of country above all. We witnessed hope and resolve and a remarkable commitment to healing everywhere we were. In the ravaged kibbutzim or at Machne Yehuda on a busy Friday afternoon, we saw not just life going on, but life going on with love and resolve. Love of land, love of the Jewish people, love of what Israel has been, and resolve for what Israel still can be. All that was as immediate as the grief that we experienced. Our visit with the Tweedo family encapsulated what I'm trying to describe. For those of you who knew them, I'm sure you remember Moti and Shiri's charm and vibrancy, their pride and their love of Israel. All of that still remains. When they shared their grief over the loss of their son Ayal, age 23, killed in the Battle of Khan Yunis, their heartbreak brought tears to our eyes. But when Modi spoke of Ayal's character and values, his dedication to Torah, his commitment to his troops, and the light he brought to everyone who knew him, Moti's broken spirit dissipated right before our eyes. He stood tall with his chest puffed out the way I remembered him from Oakland. And that brought not tears to us, but awe and inspiration. We realized standing before Ayal's grave with his parents that there was no greater strength than the broken heart of the Jewish people. How did we respond to all these wrenching experiences? On my last Shabbat at the Rambam Shul in Katamon, their rabbi shared something that I think helps to answer that question of how we responded as a group. He told us of a woman who was given to recurring fainting spells, which would often happen in public spaces among strangers. The natural response to such a disturbing sight would be, of course, to quickly help the woman to her feet. And that was what most often happened, he said. But on one occasion, the rabbi described perhaps a more appropriate response. A person seeing the woman there on the ground laid himself beside her and held her, conscious that perhaps she was not ready or even able to stand up just yet. That was our response to what we experienced. We realized that we had neither right or ability to do anything but to lie down alongside those who shared their stories with us and alongside a country who had lost their footing. We just tried to lie down on the ground with them and each in our own ways tried to hold them. Experiencing that feeling of helplessness and solidarity was what I think our week was all about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Todd, as well as Leslie and Rebecca. I believe we have Leah's remarks and Barry's as well. Leah, would you like me to read on your behalf? I know Leah wasn't feeling great, so I had offered to read it.
If you would, don't mind. Thank you so much.
Of course, refresh them. We're grateful that Leah's here with us. I'm going to share screens again for some of Leah's reflections that I also have here written out. If I can see through. Okay, perfect. So on Leah's behalf, number one, so Leah shared 5 reflections. Number one of my clearest memories of October 7th is of sitting next to Rabbi Cohen's mother during services while the rabbi told us what was happening in Israel. It was an indescribable and life-altering moment. During this trip, the Cohen and Eliav family met with us to share more about Yoav's life and what they are doing to keep his memory and legacy. One of the most important and moving moments of the trip for me was when the rabbi's mother told me that having seen me both on October 7th and then again at Yoav's graveside felt like completing a circle. I feel so grateful that this was meaningful to her. If nothing else had happened on this trip, this alone would have been enough. Number 2, being at Kfar Aza. This was the first place we went in Israel after being in Tel Aviv and felt immediate sense of recognition and being at home, which was quite heavy a thing to feel at the site of an atrocity. I didn't take any photographs there. I had been at the event in Berkeley some months ago when Ron Elon of Kfar Aza told us his story and the story of his brother Tal Zal, who had been the head of security for the kibbutz and fell defending it. I had been saying to Hillel for several of the hostages from Kfar Aza since Ron Elon's talk. Being in their home, feeling the sense of a shared context, added so much weight to their names. Doron bat Sarah, Shmuel ben Gladys, Emily Tehila bat Amanda, Gali ben Talia, Ziv ben Talia. Number 3, meeting IDF soldiers. At Sheba Hospital, meeting Dvir, who was wounded into disability and witnessed his best friend Shalev and much of his unit fall in Gaza. Dvir decided that what he will do with these experiences is to live by the wisdom of Modani. And meeting young soldiers, one of whom said he had been at the Nova Party, who were about to deploy back to the tunnels of Gaza in a matter of hours. One of them, Daniel, wanted to talk about his frustration at feeling the world is against them. I've never given encouragement to someone who was about to go into hell before, and I didn't know the right things to say. But I was so grateful to have the chance to look him in the eyes and tell him that not everyone is against them, that we'd come thousands of miles to tell him the opposite, that we're with them, that the whole world should really be thanking them because they are the front line of defending everyone against this evil. And I'm sorry not everyone understands, but it's still true. He seemed comforted, thank God. He and his friend told me their names and welcomed our prayers for them. Daniel ben Evgenia and Tor ben Orly. Number 4, my first time seeing the Kotel from the hospital promenade. The chance to have this in view and know empirically in which direction to daven was indescribable. During Shabbat, because of my broken foot, I hadn't been able to go there. Instead, I davened in the basement of the hotel with refugees from Kiryat Shmona, who had been living in the hotel for several months. Their graciousness and hospitality to me was so kind it was overwhelming. When I arrived on Friday evening, I was the first woman there. I asked in my limited Hebrew where the women's section was and was shown there. Then I asked, Mizrach, so I'd know in which direction to pray. The man laughed at me so kindly and said, "You're in Jerusalem. You're already there." He raised his hands and looked up. "The prayers go up," he said. "Okay," I laughed. "But Beit HaMikdash?" And then he pointed to the wall behind me. Seeing it myself the next day in a panoramic view made that moment even more special in retrospect. Moments of hiddenness and revelation, moments of being broken and limited, moments of transcendence, and seeing the elements of hiddenness and revelation, brokenness and transcendence in different ways in both of these experiences. Finally, number 5. Sunset over Jerusalem from Elise's balcony in Kiryat HaYovel. I spent my last few days in Israel visiting Alice and her new baby, Shael. Shael is a beautiful reminder of my hope for the future for her and all of Israel. Thank you, Leah. Wishing you a refreshed Leah as well. Okay. And last but certainly not least, I'd like to ask Gary if he would share his reflections with our group.
Sure. I'll begin, my reflections will begin with a pasuk that we read every day in Pesukah de Zimra. Harofei l'shrei lev, mechabesh la'atzvotam. He is the healer of the brokenhearted and the one who binds up their sorrows. And one of the things that struck me right away from literally the second that you arrive in Eretz Israel is just how many broken hearts Hashem unfortunately still needs to heal. And you see literally from the second you're walking down the corridor to passport control in the airport when you see all the posters of the hostages who are still being held in Gaza. And you see those posters everywhere. You see them at bus stops and train stations or restaurants and supermarkets. Everywhere you see these posters, "Bring them home now." And one of our tour guides, Yitzhak, actually said to me that slogan, "Bring them home now," is actually the wrong slogan, because implicit in that is that it's the onus is on Israeli government to bring home the hostages. And his feeling is that this was such a horrific crime against humanity that the entire world should be rising up in outrage and saying, send them home, not bring them home. But as we know, unfortunately, that is not the current state of affairs, and the onus does right now rest on the shoulders of our Israeli leaders to figure out some way to bring those hostages home. So we had many, many moving examples of sitting with people whose loved ones are still being held captive there, and the hell that those people are going through, who are stuck in those tunnels somewhere in Gaza, and the hell that our family and loved ones are going through without any idea of what's happening to them, and the pain that they suffer every single moment of every day and sleepless night, wanting them to be home immediately. And we even with Rabbi Peretz, whose son was killed in battle, whose body is still being held hostage in Gaza, and he can't even give him a proper burial. And you feel the tremendous pain of these people. And on one hand, you're saying, yes, what can we do to bring every single one of these people home, right now? And you're holding that on one hand, horn of the dilemma. The other horn of the dilemma is that we also met, as everyone's spoken with, of families who've lost their beautiful children, soldiers in this war. And when you hear their stories, these are just tremendously beautiful young people who are filled with such passion and such talent and such gifts, and for such love of Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael. And the pain of their loss is just so crushing. And so the question that I've been struggling with ever since the beginning of the war, and it came to very, very sharp relief during the trip to Israel, is, so here's the issue. Any deal that's going to involve the return of the hostages is going to necessitate the release of hundreds of these monsters from our prisons to release back into Gaza, where they can potentially put our soldiers at greater danger and greater risk. So the joy that every family member has with getting their loved one home from Gaza could potentially be met with the price of another family having to lose one of their precious children in battle. And towards the end of the trip, we had the good fortune to meet with Rabbi Benny Lau. And I asked him that question. I said, given that we're on the horns of this dilemma, what is the right thing to do? How do you know what's right? And he answered that there is no answer. And his only suggestion was he sent us a tefillah that effectively the only thing we can do is pray that Hashem will give wisdom to the leaders of Yisrael to make that right decision, because it's just beyond human comprehension to know what's the right thing to do. All we can do is pray that Hashem will provide through his divine wisdom and channel that to our leaders to make that right decision. And so our trip ended at the Has Promenade, overlooking the panorama of Yerushalayim, overlooking the Har Habayit, and we had that last final opportunity to generate those prayers directly, as Leah was saying, heaven's words to Hashem, that he should impart his divine wisdom on our leaders and heal those many, many hearts that are still so broken.
Oh, thank you, Barry. I just want to thank everyone who participated on this mission. I want to double check that I didn't miss anyone who was on the mission and is here with us tonight. A number of people I knew weren't coming, but specifically Diana and Leora or Laura, are any of you here? Okay. Again, I just want to say a huge thank you to what I'll say are the Nachshons, those who jumped into the water or maybe jumped onto an airplane to be with us in Israel for this really powerful mission. It wasn't a simple decision to fly to Israel in the midst of a war. It certainly felt even more complicated on the second day when we had found out about the risk coming from Iran. And I'm just really grateful and proud to everyone who made the effort to be there. And to those of you who had the kavanah, who had the intent and the desire to join us, but weren't able to for any other reason, We know that your hearts were with us, and as we're taught, the machshava shevi mitzarefet l'maaseh, that just the intent and the thought to be in Israel, for your hearts to be in Israel right now, Hashem should see that as though you were actually there with us. And like Rabbi Cohen said, you really were there with us. We brought your hearts to the families that we visited. I told the Tweetos how there were hundreds of people that we were representing when we were there with them at Eyal's grave. And I know, as was mentioned on several occasions, that Rabbi Cohen's family felt that way as well. To thank Rabbi Cohen, who's been my partner in crime for the last 10 years since I arrived in the Bay Area, for agreeing to do something a little crazy together. We've done a few crazy things over the years. This was certainly up there on the list. To thank each member of our community who contributed their time, their effort, their tefillot, their prayers, and their funds for tzedakah. Again, thank you so much. Specifically to the families of Yoav Malayev, Eyal Twito, Daniel Perez, who shared their broken hearts with us, like Todd said, their broken and whole hearts at the same time. I want to just mention two other people, and then at the risk of forgetting others, there were so many other people that we met with and encountered with, and each of them was a moving experience. We got to meet with Ari Barshain, who is the grandson of Barbara Barrera and Mal Barrera from the Beth Jacob community, and Michelle and Alan Moskowitz's nephew, and our High Holiday Chazan Noah Barshain's brother. And Ari is a commander who has spent the majority of the last 10 months in Gaza directing his troops. He came to meet us late at night. He was on break from, I think, his third round in Gaza, and just shared about leadership and what it means to be like a Kohen Gadol, to be like a high priest who has to sacrifice even their relationship with family at times to take care of the Jewish people, feeling that really palpable sacrifice, not just in those who sacrifice their lives, but those who are living and yet are giving day and night, and sacrificing their hygiene and their careers and their time caring for their newborn and toddler children, like in Ari's case, to defend our people right now. And the last thing I'll just say, I found there were such small but meaningful moments, and one of them was at Shabbat lunch in Jerusalem. Like I think was mentioned before by Leah, our group was in the Cassia Hotel, formerly known as the King Solomon, and the hotel seemed to be at least 50% filled. Maybe my numbers could be off, but there were at least 100 members of the Kiryat Shmona community, Kiryat Shmona, which is all the way up in northern Israel, and they've been essentially refugees in their own country because it's too dangerous to live up north with the Hezbollah rocket attacks. And so they've basically been camped out at this hotel since October. And you have it's a Sephardic Misorati Dati community. Not everyone's observant. Some people are Shomrei Shabbat, some people are not Shomrei Shabbat, and they all congregate in the dining room. It feels like a kibbutz in that sense for their Shabbat meals. And we were sitting right next to a table with a family where some of them, I think, were very observant. Some of them were maybe less outwardly observant. And what seemed to be the father of the family introduces himself because he saw we had a really nice bottle of wine. Thank you. Barry had purchased a nice bottle of wine as gratitude to Jeff and to Rabbi Cohen, and I guess, and to myself for this very special meal. And we were just going around pouring it. And when he sees that we had a bottle of wine, he comes over with a May Eden bottle filled with something red in it. May Eden is one of the popular water bottle brands in Israel. And he's like, come drink this thing that is in my unmarked water bottle. And I was very confused, but he takes a cup, he pours it for me. I'm like, okay, what is this? And it turns out he's the winemaker of the Alfasi winery up north in Kiryat Shmona. And he's the only member of his family who's actually still going up there during the week because he's an essential worker. And he comes back for Shabbat where his family is safe in Jerusalem. And he would not, eventually I forced him to drink a little bit of our wine, but he was just so insistent on sharing the bounty of Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, with us. And that moment of generosity from someone whose family is really struggling, but did not want to stay in the muck, but really wanted to focus on the positive. That for me was just one simple, profound moment. And as much as we were there to give, I think we received so much in return. And we're not yet planning, but if we were to ever do this again, I hope you consider joining us, because this was a really remarkable, and I'll speak for myself, transformative, life-transforming experience. So that's it for tonight. I'm going to pause the recording, and if anyone needs to go, fully understand. And if you'd like to ask questions, for those of us who are still up, you're welcome to do so as well. Thank you, everyone. Shabbat Shalom, Good Shabbos, and Tiskul Mitzvot. May we all merit in our communities, in our united community, to continue to support each other, to continue to support Am Yisrael and the people of Israel and the state of Israel and the land of Israel. Laila Tov.